group. So on the screen, you'll see, and today's presentation, by the way, is really about exercise and aging. And being that my demographic is mostly baby boomers and seniors, this is very apropos to what we do for a business. And the mantra that you see at the top of the screen, it's never too late to start exercising, but always too soon to stop, is really important to our beliefs. And we think anybody can come in and we can get them started and sustain them on an exercise program. So let's launch into this thing. So you've heard me talk about the fact that exercise is not the fountain of youth, it is the fountain of longevity. And I actually need to correct that, because in the process of doing this presentation, I learned that really it's the fountain of quality of life. And I'm going to explain that as we move forward. So we all know that there's been countless studies to confirm regular physical fitness slows down the aging process and helps prolong life. And one of these studies was done by the Cooper Center in Dallas in the 70s. Dr. Kenneth Cooper is the man who coined the word aerobics. And during this particular study, they tracked more than 10,000 men and 3,000 women who were older than 35 to test if physically fit exercisers lived longer and healthier lives. And what they found out is they generally do, and that the most physically fit men and women had mortality rates of about 1/3 to 1/4 of those who were least fit. In addition, the center tracked over several decades more than 18,000 healthy middle-aged individuals to see who got chronic health conditions, such as diabetes and Alzheimer's. And among both men and women, those who were most fit were about half as likely to suffer from these chronic diseases. And if they did get sick, they did so at an older age. And that's important to remember as we move through this presentation. So really it brings credence to the saying, we do not quit playing because we grow old. We grow old because we quit playing. Okay, so that brings me to the next topic. I'm going to introduce a new word maybe in your vocabulary. Does anyone know what senescence means? All right, a lot of hands got raised, right? Well, senescence is the condition or the process of deterioration with age. It's the loss of the cell's power of division and growth. And, you know, let's face it, as we age, we have the potential of getting disease, right? So we need to understand what's the connection between aging and senescence. And these two processes are frequently confused. Senescence does not necessarily correlate with age. It's influenced much more by environmental factors, such as eating correctly, a healthy diet, getting physical activity, and something as simple as just getting too much radiation throughout life, right? These are environmental factors. Hold on one second. So there are many conditions that occur more commonly with advancing age, but only some of these are actually caused by age. For instance, menopause, right? It's a normal consequence of aging that happens when a woman's ovaries run out of eggs. In contrast, type 2 diabetes are not necessarily intrinsic to aging process itself, but instead from the factors like obesity and physical inactivity, which has damaging effects as we get older. I'm gonna try to move this thing on the bottom of my screen. Oh, it does move, great. Okay, so as we age, not all of us will get high blood pressure or dementia or incontinence. That is very true. But throughout life, we senesce, and we senesce from a multitude of nasty processes that damage the cells, tissues, organs. We are essentially oxidizing. So the three main factors of senescence is oxidation. It's, you know, you've heard about the free radicals that steal electrons from other molecules. We oxidize, we're rusting basically throughout life. There's also what's called mitochondrial dysfunction. And probably Grant knows a lot about this. When the mitochondria ceases to function properly or dwindles in number, this causes senescence or illness. And then there's finally something called glycation or glycation. I'm not sure exactly how to pronounce it. This is when sugar molecules with heat react with proteins, and it basically causes the browning of things, such as burnt cookies. But when this stuff gets inside your tissues, it produces compounds that stiffen your blood vessels, wrinkle skin, harden lenses in your eyes, clog up kidneys, causes all kinds of damage, including inflammation. And if anyone saw my presentation in March, talked a lot about what happens with low-level inflammation. Very important that we try to avoid that. So besides those three major conditions, there's a whole bunch of other factors that contribute to senescence throughout life. And I'm just kind of showing them up on the screen: plaque buildup, brain cells die, membranes tear, bones dwindle and crack, tendons and ligaments fray. Look, bottom line is, unless we repair these and many other forms of damage, our bodies become more vulnerable to breaking down like cars driven too many miles. So there's hope. Aging and senescence are not inextricably linked. To a varying degree, most of these destructive processes can be prevented or slowed, and the damage they cause can be mended. So there was another study done in the 1960s that basically compared the effects of being too sedentary and to what happens when you're overly sedentary, and then all of a sudden bring exercise into the equation. So during the study, they paid 25-year-olds to first spend 3 weeks in bed and then to undergo an intensive 8-week exercise program. As you can imagine, bed rest was ruinous because after 3 weeks, their bodies resembled that of 40-year-olds. But once they applied exercise for 8 weeks, they were able to not only reverse the deterioration, but in some cases lead to net improvements. So what they found out then, the lead researcher from the study, basically his message was simple: humans were meant to move. But the study went a little further. There was an idea that came up to study the same group of 25-year-olds 35 years later to see how aging had its effect. So you can imagine what 3 decades of a typical American lifestyle had done to these folks. They'd all gained about 50 pounds. They had higher blood pressure, weaker hearts. They were less fit in numerous ways. And they essentially tried to undo these consequences of 30 years of sedentariness with a 6-month program of walking, cycling, and jogging. And they found that this second late in life intervention helped the volunteers lose about 10 pounds, but more astoundingly, largely reversed their decline in cardiovascular fitness, because after 6 months of moderate exercise, the average volunteer's blood pressure, resting heart rate, cardiac output returned back to 20-year-old levels. Look, there's many other studies that confirm the anti-aging benefits of exercise. So I think we understand there's a science behind this. So the next question then to ask is, how does it work? Why does exercise work? Well, it prevents or ameliorates the bad things that accelerate senescence. And the top of this list is fat. When you exercise, it staves off and sometimes reverses the accumulation of excess fat, especially belly fat, which is one of the chief causes of inflammation and other problems. We know that exercise lowers bloodstream levels of sugar, fat, and unhealthy cholesterol that slowly contribute to hardening of the arteries, gums up the works, basically. And then exercise also improves your cardiovascular function. And as Joe said earlier, he feels better because he has lower levels of stress hormones, and he's revved up his metabolism. And of course, exercise is going to improve bone strength and a lot more. All right, so we're going to shift now to what happens when you aren't staying in shape and all these environmental factors start to pile up. We get into this discussion over morbidity versus mortality. And look, we all got to die of something, including physically active people who eat sensibly. But the question is how are you going to live towards the end of life? So let's ask this question. Are the long-term benefits of physical activity actually exaggerated? We all know there's a growing legion of evidently healthy elderly who avoid exercise. And I think if you reflect on this, everybody knows somebody who's probably in their 70s or 80s who's alive, but they don't exercise. My mom's one of them. Okay, so I'm sure we all have somebody in our life like that. So morbidity is the condition of suffering from a disease or a medical condition. And extending or compressing morbidity becomes an important factor as we age. More inactive people are living longer and are in better health today than ever before. But there's this relationship that we have to understand between mortality and morbidity. Like the pictures show below, when you're in your early 80s, do you want to look like the women on your left? Or do you want to live the rest of your life like the women on the right? So really the discussion is about health span versus lifespan. Health span is the length of time spent in good health without morbidity. And here's another question we all have to ask ourselves. How long will we remain at a high functional capacity with limited morbidity until we die, until just before death? And there's a lot of studies about this. We don't want the morbidity line to be long and drawn out. We want it to be short and compressed. So we want to be pretty active right up until we pass, right? Which is about good quality of life. And let's face it, there's been advances in public health and in medical sciences which have changed health span and lifespan, both in good and bad. But the bad news is that even with all these medical advances in preventing and treating infectious diseases, many people today still get sick from chronic non-infectious diseases that involve many years of morbidity prior to death. And in medical jargon, this longer period of illness prior to death is called extension of morbidity. We don't want to extend it. We don't want to live bad lives unhealthy for a long time. So the quality of life matters. Look, 1 in 5 Americans over the age of 65 is in fair or poor health. And despite high morbidity, we nonetheless live much longer than our farmer ancestors, right? In 2018, the average person would live to 78 years old. That we get into our 7th decade. That's almost twice as long as 100 years ago. But we also know many people today get sick from chronic non-infectious diseases that involve many years of morbidity prior to death. So from that, we can conclude that an unhealthy lifestyle affects morbidity twice as much as mortality. Quality of life, guys. So physical activity doesn't delay death, doesn't delay mortality by preventing aging per se. Instead, physical activity triggers mechanisms that increase the chance of staying healthy with age by slowing down senescence and preventing many of those chronic diseases that contribute over time to mortality. The best advice for staying healthy as we age hasn't changed in centuries. Don't smoke, avoid obesity, eat and drink sensibly, and of course, join Loggerhead Fitness. So, like the mantra that we have, it's never too late to start exercising, but always too soon to stop. You can start exercising at any time in your life and get significant effects from that. And it's known that people start very well in their 60s and reduce their mortality rate compared with others who remain sedentary. But here's where the problem lies. Because it's not that we don't recognize the benefits of physical activity. And as Kevin pointed out in his infomercial, the problem is getting motivated to do it and figuring out how much and what kind of exercise to do. So I'm going to shift a little bit over to talking about that right now. So number one is, what motivates us to exercise? How can we make it more consistent in our lives? Is it fun? We're going to talk and see if we can examine this a little bit further. By the way, according to the US government, almost all Americans know that exercise promotes good health and that they should exercise. So we already know we need to do it, but only half of us do. 73% of high school students don't even meet the minimal levels of physical activity. Astounded by that. And 70% of adults report they never exercise in their leisure time. So when I see these statistics, you know what I think? I think there's a huge opportunity for us, because this is the exact person that we're looking for to join our gym. So if you need to give us a referral, look for people who know they need to exercise, but haven't been able to figure out how to work it into their lives. Many of these people think that exercise is unnecessary, it takes up too much time, and it keeps them from higher priority activities. And that may be true in some ways. So time is the biggest barrier. Exercise is often emotionally unrewarding and physically unpleasant. So how do we make it more fun? So here's a couple bullet points of ideas of how to kind of get motivated to exercise. Number one, we're social animals. So be social, exercise with friends. Small group training with me on Friday at 12:30 would be a great way to get a quick 25-minute workout in and hit some of your goals. Entertain yourself, listen to music, podcasts, books, watch a movie. Exercise outside in a beautiful environment. And variety, which is for me very important, mix things up. And then choose realistic goals based on time, not performance, because it's effort that matters when it comes to physical activity. And be willing to reward yourself when you do it. Okay, so I'm going to finish off here talking about the cycle and the successful cycle of motivation. How you can really get motivated to bring exercise into your life and to keep it, to retain it. Now, this infographic is a little confusing, so I'm going to break it down into the small pieces. But let's start with the image of the person in the middle. That's Sam. And Sam has figured out that when he exercises, it brings a lot of joy to his life and really keeps him going. So as Anne pointed out earlier, it is a gift. But what exercise really is self-care. So Sam started working out, and he did this for about 3 or 4 months, and he was going great. He was scheduling all his healthy behaviors, eating right, going to the gym. But then about 6 months down the road, life got in the way. And all these other things he has to do, all these other roles that he has during the day started to interfere with his exercise and certainly prioritizing it and scheduling. And so 6 months later, Sam hits a roadblock and he stops exercising. And this is pretty consistent with a lot of people, because this is what happens in life. But Sam knows that he has to do some self-care. And there's so many options throughout the day of what he needs to do with his time. And self-care is one of those things. So how does he find the time? How does he work it in? And really what happens when anyone tries to bring self-care into their lives, it starts to compete with all these other roles that we have, right? Being a professional, being a friend, a volunteer, being a parent, being a spouse. So throughout the day, throughout the week, we have all these roles, and we rarely take the time to give ourselves self-care. That's really important as we perform in these other roles. So self-care is locked out by what matters most. Okay, the things that you do throughout the day, that's what matters most, but you're locking out self-care because you're putting too much of an emphasis on these other roles that you have. So how do we unlock self-care? Well, it's a simple solution. It's just not easy to implement, right? The key is you got to prioritize it. And once you realize that and you start to understand the effects of what physical activity and self-care will do for you, you will make it a priority. It will become sustainable and you'll keep it into your life. So what Sam's learned about self-care when he started to exercise again, and it was really working for him, is it gave him energy, lots of energy. It gave him focus, and it lifted his mood. And when all those things are happening simultaneously, it actually helps him be more productive as a professional, more caring as a spouse, and certainly more patient as a parent. So these are very, very important parts of him. And it all happened from just spending 30 minutes a day of moving that made the other 23 and a half hours of his day super highly productive. Self-care is essential fuel for what matters most. What matters most is being a dad, a professional partner. And if that matters most to you, then you need to feel at your best to do that. And when you're at your best, you're better at doing everything. So self-care makes you better. It makes you better at all the things that matter most in your life. And going back to the original infographic, starting with the blue, who am I? Well, that's who we all are. We're all these roles. But to be good at those roles, we need to have some sort of fuel that makes us, very good at doing what we do during the day. So self-care, or physical activity in this case, becomes an essential fuel that we need, that helps us sustain and fuel the things that matter most, which is being these different roles throughout the day. And when you can get physical activity and self-care to this level, you'll never give it up, because you know that it makes you be your best self. Okay, that's basically my presentation. I'm going to finish with 3 more slides. One thing that a lot of people ask is, how much exercise do we need? And you've heard me talk about this, but the World Health Organization's guidelines say that we should be doing 150 minutes of moderate. And 150 minutes, by the way, is 2.5 hours. If you do a half hour of physical activity 5 days a week, you have hit that limit of 150 minutes of moderate exercise, or 75 minutes of vigorous activity per week. Now, the reason I have the MyZone picture up here is that we sell this heart rate monitoring system. There's a new device out that you can wear on your wrist, or on your arm, or on your chest. But when you go into a MyZone product with heart rate monitoring, it actually will tell you exactly when you've hit these limits. And it's important that we have some way of monitoring them. Okay, so I'm going to finish with our specials at the gym. I didn't talk about myself today. I didn't talk about the gym. Most of you know what I do. If you want to learn about the gym, come and visit me and do a one-on-one. But we do have a couple specials I want to mention. We do have our summer special. Marie brought this up earlier. It's 8 weeks for $88. You get 2 half-hour training sessions built into that. By the way, if anyone refers someone to me who joins the gym and buys an 8-week program, I'll give you either a $25 Amazon gift card or 2 half-hour training sessions. And then we also have a personal training special. A lot of people need that extra coaching, that extra help. I actually have a trainer I work with once a week. So when you buy a 20-pack in the month of July, we'll give you 2 extra training sessions. And incidentally, we're selling those 20 packs at even a lower price than normal. So it's an excellent deal. Listen, I want to thank everybody in this group for helping us get through the pandemic and supporting me throughout the last 18, 20 months. It's been very, very difficult. We were able to somehow win, again, the voting contest for Best Fitness Center in Palm Beach County, now the 3rd year in a row. And we really appreciate that. And we feel like we are providing a really outstanding service for people. So with that, I'm done. I wanted to say thank you, everybody, for your support.